And there's intimacy on the radio, and there's naturalness on the radio that can never be replicated on TV. The marvelous resurgence of radio as a political force in this country.
News-related radio programming is evolving.
There's a huge hole in our dialogue that can be filled by the synthesis of traditional radio and the freedom that comes from a live podcast. You're about to experience Cowboy State Politics live. Here we go. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to another tremendous installment from very, very high above all the puerile and insipid forms of Wyoming mainstream media. This is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics studio in Sheridan, Wyoming. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. Happy Thursday. I'm glad to be back after a couple of days off. So if you were wondering where I was for the last couple of days, I got an invitation to go on a little turkey hunt over in the northeast corner of the state. And I did see a turkey. I actually saw a couple of them. I only got a shot at one of them. And in my defense, it was a pretty difficult shot. Could only see its head. And I missed. And so, as the old man, Mr. Iverson would say, well, if you get a shot, you shouldn't complain, because if you missed, that's your fault. And so came home empty-handed without a turkey, which, made the lovely Christine exceedingly happy. She's not a fan of wild turkeys. In fact, whenever they're around, I kind of have to chase them away from her. But anyway, had a good time. Got some time away. Now, I hope you enjoyed the John Baggett guest host for the last couple of days. It's the first time. Well, I shouldn't say the first time. It's the first time in a long time that I've had somebody fill in for me on the program. And it's my personal belief that unless I can prevent it, the show must go on, or unless there's no way that I can prevent it, the show must go on. You have to have your daily dose of Cowboy State Politics, and so I've been talking with John back and forth for I wouldn't say for quite a while, but for a while. And I told him, hey, if there's ever a chance to for you to fill in on the program, well, I'd be more than happy to let you do that. As you can see, we have a couple of the studio dogs with us. And, they're kind of temperamental. Sometimes they don't want to stick around in the studio, especially when it's time for, their morning meal. But anyway, I'm glad to be back on the show. I can see the comments today, so please let me know what you thought of of John Baggett and the last couple of days. I'm interested to hear. Also, anything else you want to chime in on? We may do some calls at the top of the hour. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. It's kind of flying by the seat of my pants this morning. So we'll just see what happens. And anyway, so let's get going. We've got a couple of things on the agenda today. The GOP convention starts today. The committee meetings, and the actual convention takes place on Saturday, but the committee meetings are starting today. There's a couple of different things we need to talk about with those, and so we'll do that. There was another hearing for the abortion case. The judge decided not to rule on that one. And that's pretty normal in any sort of lawsuit. The judge just kind of takes things under advisement until the next hearing. And then, of course, if you didn't hear, the Virginia Democrats have succeeded in convincing voters that they need to redistrict their entire state and perhaps remove any ability for Republicans to have any representation in Congress. And, and it's interesting for a couple of reasons. One, I used to live in Virginia. But two, that socialist Spanberger that took over, she's been making, I think that even during the campaign, she was saying that she was going to redistrict the state. But I mean, the way that they wrote the ballot measure is one of the really interesting parts. I mean, essentially it said, in order to make things more fair, we're going to redistrict. Just got a comment in. Harry, good morning. Good morning to everybody, by the way. Harry says he's in the bylaws committee as we speak. Of course he is. He's always there early. And that's going to be kind of the hotbed of a lot of the, controversial stuff that is up for debate at the GOP convention. So I suppose let's just start there since Harry's in the committee. So there's a piece in the Cowboy, of course there is, and this one's entitled, Wyoming GOP Considering Loyalty Tests for Candidates, Voiding State Laws. All right, well, this is kind of a perennial topic for the Cowboy. Anytime Republicans try to assert their authority as the Republican brand, the Cowboy steps in and calls it a loyalty test, or a litmus test is another one of their favorite phrases. But here's the thing, right? It is a private organization. The Republican Party is a private corporation. And so, as we learned with the Kappa Kappa Gamma lawsuit, that private entities can decide for themselves who is a member and who is not. Thank you, Wyoming court system. And this is one of those things that I bet the left never even considered the possibility that this would have reverberations to other organizations, but it absolutely does. If a sorority can decide that they want to let a male member in, and there's nothing anybody else can say about it, then why is it that the Republican Party can't say, we're not going to invite you in because you're not a Republican? How is it that they can include people and the Republican Party cannot include people? It's a fascinating ruling, and it's one that I hope that everybody takes notice of, because it absolutely fits within the rubric of what the Republican Party is saying. But let's go to the Cowboy and see what Claire McFarland has to say in her 27-page article. Okay, it's not 27 pages, it's more like 9, but typical Cowboy stuff. And I quote, some county Republican parties are asking the Wyoming Republican Party to consider loyalty tests for candidates and declare some state laws void. The state GOP meets Thursday, where it will review more than 100 proposed bylaw changes. Some county Republican parties are asking the Wyoming Republican Party to throw off the state election laws that govern it, establish loyalty tests for political candidates seeking its nomination or endorsement, and tighten the party's dispute resolution process. Let's see here. Many of those say that the state GOP has the autonomy rights of a private group. Why wouldn't it? Just because there's an election involved does not mean that it is not a private organization, which it absolutely is. Now, are there some connections to elections? Sure, of course there are. But that doesn't mean that a private corporation can't decide who is and who is not a member of it. And, here's the other side of this, and this might be somewhat of an unpopular view, but let me just give you an alternate argument to this. So let's get in the Wayback Machine and go back, 8 or 9 years, when the Republican Party was run by a bunch of redcoats. Absolutely. I mean, the people in power, Deemer True, Matt Michaeli, those folks, straight up redcoats. They are Matt Michaeli and Deemer True after they were, I don't know if deposed is the right word, but after they were not in leadership in the Republican Party, they set up a PAC called Wyoming Hope. Wyoming Hope, I've talked about this a lot on the program, but it is the political action committee that is chiefly responsible for a lot of the liberal legislators that are still in office. They almost exclusively donate to liberal redcoats. And they're, by definition, if you look at the Republican Party platform, those people don't meet hardly any of it. But here's my argument. So let's say that conservatives lose power, and it is the redcoats that controls everything. And you end up being the lone conservative voice. You're the one that's saying, no, none of what you're doing is Republican. Does any of this sound familiar? There were a lot of people in county parties that were in this very situation. Now, what would stop them, the redcoats who were in power, what would stop them from saying that, oh, no, we've redefined what the word Republican means. You're not in the group, and so you're not going to be part of the Republican Party. What is to stop them from doing that? Okay, so and let me liken this to Robert's Rules of Order. Okay, everybody has heard of that book, and essentially it's the guidebook for how you conduct meetings. Well, those rules exist to protect the rights of the minority. So, no matter what is happening, there is a way for the minority to have a voice, and they should have a voice. But what happens when we, that is conservatives, end up being in the minority? I think that this is something that conservatives sometimes don't think about. What happens when we lose power? Because the political pendulum swings both ways, my friends. And even though we're in power right now, in the party and in the House of Representatives, it doesn't mean that it's always going to be like that. And if you think of a pendulum, when you pull it, a long ways to the right and you let it go, what happens? It swings all the way to the left. And so it is very likely that at some point in the future, conservatives are not going to be in power. And so those folks who are, whatever changes are made, well, those are going to be available to them too. So keep that in mind as we go through this. And that's, by the way, if you're wanting to know, that's studio dog number 1 named Maisie. Maisie is a golden lab. She's a real sweetheart. But she likes to hang out underneath the desk in the studio. But when mom comes home and it's breakfast time, yeah, they don't want to hang out with dad anymore. All right, so let's go back to the article. Quote: it's based on an assertion that under the First Amendment associational right and prior court cases, the Wyoming Republican Party can function how it wishes. It's a question recently posted in an ongoing Wyoming court case where Hot Springs County Republican Party members who say they were wrongly ousted from leadership positions are using state law to challenge the state party. And there's long been a push and pull between the Wyoming Republican Party and state statutes. And you would have to know the inside baseball of this. Let me just give you a little slice of it. That a lot of the statutes in Title 22 is our election code, are meant to keep the Republican Party at bay. For example, there's no money can be spent during a primary season on any one particular candidate. So in other words, the Republican Party can't say, we endorse candidate X over candidate Y, and we're going to spend a whole bunch of money on candidate X and not candidate Y. So that you can't do that during a primary season right now. And it's my view that a lot of those laws were written to keep the redcoats in power, to make it harder for the state party to act in elections. Now, that being said, the primary election, the Republican primary election, is only for Republicans. So we shouldn't have to deal with Democrats that are crossing over. And I don't know if you've noticed this or not, but there are a lot of high-profile Democrats that are Republicans, rather, that are calling on Democrats to switch parties and register as Republicans so that they can make changes, so they could vote in the Republican Party primary, even though those people are not Republicans at all. And it doesn't matter how much and how often Gail Simmons tries to claim that crossover voting doesn't happen. It is an absolute fact. In the 2018 primary, 12,500 Democrats switched their party registration from Democrat to Republican. And Mark Gordon ended up winning that election by around 9,000 votes. I wonder, and there would be no way to figure this out. But he only won by 9,000. There were 12,500 that crossed over. I think pretty much everybody can do the math on there, and figure out that a lot of those people ended up voting for Mark Gordon. And by the way, as it relates to that, here is a letter, quote, letter to the editor, that was posted in the Wyoming Turkey Vulture this morning. And this one, listen to this. Okay, so here's the headline. Okay, hold on. Let me show you this. It is we're probably going to have to do the screen share. Let me just see. put a bad. Yeah, okay. So this is going to look a little weird for a minute, but just hang with me. Okay, so here is the headline from the Wyoming Turkey Vulture. Governor Gordon was the only real Republican fighting for the state of Wyoming. Okay, so we know that Governor Mark Gordon is not a Republican, really. I mean, he is a dyed-in-the-wool redcoat. He has been for his entire life, and that's not saying anything negative about Mark Gordon. It's just that he's not a conservative Republican. But that's the headline, okay? So the headline is, Governor Mark Gordon was the only real Republican fighting for the state of Wyoming. Now, here's the op-ed. Quote, sorry to hear Gordon is not running again. He's been the real Republican fighting against the far right, trying to take over our state. Also, Chuck Gray, really? He is the antithesis of American values. No, really, that's the op-ed. That's the total. That's the whole thing. There's nothing more to it. But yet, the headline in big, bold letters says Governor Mark Gordon was the only real Republican. Now, the truth is that Governor Mark Gordon cannot run for governor because we have term limits. And though the term limits were overturned for the other 4 statewide electeds, the Supreme Court declined to turn the one over for governor. So, no, he can't. And no, we don't need him. And no, he's not a real Republican. So let's get back to the bylaws committee. Now, there's one in particular that really, really fries me. It was an attempt by Brian Miller to try to exclude members of the press from leadership in the party. Now, as far as I know, there are only a couple of people that are involved in the press that are members of the Republican Party. One of them is me. The other one is my business partner and friend, Rebecca Bextel. And the other one is a guy here in Sheridan named Jim Schellinger. Jim Schellinger has been at Sheridan Media for a really long time. But, and I mean, there's a couple of other people that work for the Open Range Record that are members of the State Central Committee. But other than that, there isn't anybody else. It was a blatant attempt by Brian Miller, the chairman of the Wyoming Republican Party, to exclude members of the press. Now, you might say, well, why would a member of the press want to be a member of the Republican Party? Why not? I mean, if the Republican Party is a group that accepts everybody, then and that focuses on Republican values, then you would think it might be an asset to have members of the press. Not to mention, it's absolutely exclusionary. I mean, it is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard of. It's wrong. And Brian Miller, the state chairman, he absolutely made an attempt to do it. Now, a couple of other things that it did is if you were a member of the county party or the state party, and let's say you're the vice chair or the chairman, and you decide that you're going to run for office, well, this bylaw would mean that you're automatically out as a member of leadership. The irony being, of course, that Brian Miller, as chairman of the Sheridan County Republican Party, ran for state office 2 times, 3. Well, it might have been 3 while he was chairman, but he never resigned his seat. No, he just took a step back while he was running for office. But yet, it's rules for thee, not for me. And now that Brian Miller and his pals are in power in the state party, well, then, now we can do whatever we want. But that bylaw change was absolutely defeated. I think it was defeated 92-2. I mean, it was a voice vote, so hard to tell. But all I heard was two voices voting for it, and the other 90-some, I mean, strongly against it. So that one, as far as I know, is not up for a proposed change in the bylaws committee right now. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it can't be brought up on the floor. But I think we've done a pretty good job at the Open Range Record in exposing what Brian Miller and his pals are trying to do. But I really don't think that it's going to pass. I was talking to a fairly prominent member of the State Central Committee yesterday, and I brought it up, and he just laughed. He's like, "Yeah, that thing's not going anywhere. It's not going to pass." So, but there's a whole bunch of others. So let's talk about this loyalty test. I guess we kind of got off subject a little bit. Let's see here. Yeah, we got plenty of time to do this. All right. So there is no reason why a private corporation should not be able to determine who is a member of their outfit and who isn't. It works for the sorority. It should work for the Republican Party. Now, I mean, it's courts and legislators. They have a vested interest in not allowing that to happen. But it doesn't make any sense that you shouldn't be able to. So what some counties have done is they've decided that, if you're a candidate and you're a Republican, you have the chance to fill out a platform pledge, right? How much do you agree? How much do you agree with the party platform? Oh, you know what? I forgot about one thing for that officer incompatibility thing, the bylaw change I was talking about a minute ago. During the convention, Brian said that it was a beta test, that he was trying to push that through Sheridan County, his home county, to see if it would go through. You see, anything that goes to any committee at the state has to first go through a county, and it was Sheridan County that it was that beta test. But all right, Van, if I could stay on topic here, I'm just so fired up after a couple days off. But anyway, so. Some counties have decided that they're going to do a platform pledge. Hey, you say that you're a Republican. We're in the business of informing voters. So here's a pledge. How much of the platform do you agree with? How much do you don't? Be honest. We're going to find out later. And then those people who agree with 80% or more, which is kind of though I disagree with it, that's the accepted standard to be a quote unquote platform Republican. And then those results will be posted on the county website. That's the way it reads in Sheridan County. And, those people that don't, or that don't pass the platform pledge or that have serious problems with it, publish those results too and say, look, these people who are running for office, here are the results of their pledge. And it does a couple of things. First, it injects a level of accountability into it. As things are right now, there are numerous people across the state that are claiming to be Republican. One of them is former Senator R.J. Cost. R.J. Cost is a flamin' redcoat. I found a video of him, a couple of years ago before Dan Larson beat him, where he was in a Zoom room with Mike Sullivan, Democrat, with the guy that owns Better Wyoming, Nate Martin. Nate Martin is Carly Provenza's husband. And they were discussing online in a recorded meeting how that they could get more Democrats or more liberals elected into the Republican Party. Well, R.J. Cost is running around and he says he's a Republican. Well, there has to be some way that we can hold these people accountable for the things that they say and the things that they do. And so one of the ways that counties have thought, hey, we could do this and still stay within the bounds of Title 22 is ask them to fill out a platform pledge. And if you're a platform Republican, you won't have any problem doing that. Just check all the boxes, all 23 of them, sign it at the bottom, and we're good to go. That's the way it would work for me. And then those people who don't, well, publish that. Hey, these people declined to fill out our platform pledge. By the way, that tells you a heck of a lot about them. And so there shouldn't be any problem with any sort of, accountability. Why is it that you call yourself a Republican? We're Republicans. We really don't buy into this whole identity crap thing. That you are who you say you are. I can identify as a trout if I want to. No, we don't buy into all that bull crap. You either are or you aren't. It's like being pregnant. You can't be kind of pregnant. You either are pregnant or not. There's no middle ground there. And the same holds true for being a Republican or a Democrat. But the reason why folks decide to fight this whole thing is so that they can be a Democrat and they can run as a Republican and they stand a higher chance of getting elected running as a Republican. So back to the cow pie. Let's see here. A significant case in which a court upheld a private sorority, and this is what I was talking about earlier, private sorority's right to dictate the terms of its own membership unfolded in a Wyoming federal courthouse. U.S. Judge Alan Johnson declined to define the word woman for a sorority so that a group of plaintiffs could exclude a transgender member from its ranks. The state GOP argued in an October 27th court hearing that it should have the same associational right to determine its membership. Uintah County District Court Judge James Cost, or Caste, whatever you want, however he pronounces it, Kaste, didn't go for the argument. He said he would probably uphold state law in the case, and he indicated that the party's dispute resolution committee may also have broken some arbitration laws. So in other words, this is a case about excluding people based on their political beliefs. And the judge in this case says, oh, and by the way, I think the dispute resolution thing is bullcrap too. I'm probably going to strike it down too, even though it had absolutely nothing to do with the case at hand. Let's see here. And this is a funny one here. This sentence: Cowboy State Daily has obtained the more than 100 proposed changes to the Wyoming GOP bylaws set for consideration at the convention. So what? I've had a copy of them for weeks. I mean, it's just stupid the way the Cowboy tries to make you think that they're doing journalism when they're really not. Let's see here. Weston County GOP also urges the change in the draft bylaws. State law requires that major parties' county leadership groups consist of men and women elected every 2 years at the primary election. The Weston County proposal could upend that. If passed, it would call for the county and the state party leaders to be selected, quote, in such a manner as the party shall determine in these bylaws, free from any state statutory formula. If that language passed and survived the court system, the party could adopt bylaws ending the grassroots election of its leaders at the ballot box. Yeah, they could, because every other party can do that, except for the major parties. If you're the Constitution Party or the Libertarian Party or the Green Party or whatever other party we have, they can determine their leaders how they see fit. Why is it that a major party can't do the same thing? The truth is that Wyoming's laws are set arbitrarily when it comes to political parties, and they're done so for a very intentional reason, and that is to try to control the Republican Party. But like I said, at the beginning of this whole thing, that there's an other side to this too, that the Republican Party needs to be careful that whatever changes they make don't backfire on them when the conservatives are not in power anymore. Because eventually it's going to change, right? The political pendulum swings both ways. And a good example of this is, even though we have President Trump in the White House, incumbent presidents almost always lose the midterm elections. The Congress almost always flips. Don't know why. It's just probably a reaction to some of the policies, but it's almost absolute where the people in power lose the midterm elections. The same holds true for party elections, guys, that the pendulum will eventually swing back to the left, and whatever changes you make, you need to be cognizant of them so that they're not used against you. But anyway, there's a couple of them. Now, the dispute resolution thing, this goes back to a lawsuit that was filed by Natrona County. And the resolution of the lawsuit, and I'm not a lawyer, of course, and I don't play one on the radio, but the resolution of that was the judge pretty much said, hey, you don't have any sort of dispute resolution in your bylaws. So if you change that, that's going to do away with the lawsuit. And so that's what the party did, and it did end the Natrona County lawsuit. There's a lot of stuff that's going on there. And then there's always the perennial issue of counties not paying their county shares to the state. One of those is Natrona County, and I think Natrona County is probably the only one now. But they owe the state party about $50,000 in state dues, and they've made zero attempt to pay it back. And so, the other question is, if you don't pay your state dues or your state shares, can you be a member of the group? And think about it this way. Let's say you join the Masons. A venerable organization, one that I would not be opposed to joining myself, but let's say you join the Masons. And then about a year later, you just decide that you're going to stop paying your dues. You're not going to pay them what you owe them, but you still want to participate. Are they going to let you participate? Is any group, the Eagles or the Elks or the Boy Scouts or any group, if you don't pay your dues, do you still get to participate? No, you don't. And that should be no exception for Natrona County. And, and here's the thing, right? If you're making an effort, that's one thing. You know, I mean, if you owe a big bill and you strike a deal, say, hey, we can't pay the whole thing at once, but let's make payments. Okay, that's one thing. But it's an entirely another one if you make no effort to do it whatsoever, and then you demand representation in a private organization. It's just absolutely ridiculous. The truth is that the Natrona County GOP, they've had problems for years. One of my great regrets when I first started the program is I found an online document that was the proposed bylaw changes, proposed platform changes from Natrona County, and they were crazy. I mean, those proposed changes would have completely upended the Republican Party bylaw or platform and changed it into a very, very liberal document. And so I didn't save it. I just copied the link to it and put it on my website. Hey, click this link. You can go see it for yourself. And I should have printed it out and made a PDF of it. Well, now you can't find that document. They took it off their website. Wily little critters they are. All right, so let's go ahead and take a break. And when we come back, we'll continue on with the program. Cowboy State Politics Live on a Thursday. I'm back, and we'll be back in a minute. Are you tired of all the meaningless political drivel floating around right now? Endless commentary that really doesn't have anything backing it up? Do you long for the days of true investigative journalism coming from an authoritative source who really doesn't care how popular and apparently good-looking a politician is? Fortunately for you, that's what I do on Cowboy State Politics. New episodes are published every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday, and you can get them anywhere that you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, really any of them will work. But the easiest way is just to go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com. There, you can find all of the shows, as well as any of the articles I might bring up during the course of the program. Cowboy State Politics Live, the program you're listening to right now, is broadcast every Tuesday through Friday, beginning at 8 a.m. Pay attention to all of that other block-headed nonsense if you want. Just make sure that you don't miss an episode of Cowboy State Politics. And now, back to our program. Welcome back to the program, Cowboy State Politics Live. I'm David Iverson, doing what I was born to do with talent given to me by God himself. Welcome back to the program, my friends. I'm glad you could join me. Keep the comments coming. I can see them today. And by the way, you might be wondering why it is that I can't respond to comments when we're in the downtown studio. Well, it's because I have a producer there. And I can't see this screen, and this is the one where all your comments pop on. So, I get to look at them later. But today and tomorrow, well, we'll be here in the home studio, so I should be able to respond to whatever comments you got. Stick around. I think we probably will try to take some calls at the top of the hour and, see what's on your mind. I know many of you are at the state convention, and so, you have lots of stuff. And by the way, don't think because I'm here that I don't have operatives everywhere. One of the beautiful things that's happened with Cowboy State Politics is over the years, I have amassed a pretty good network of people that tell me exactly what's going on. So I don't really give a crap if the Cowboy obtained the bylaws changes. It doesn't really matter. God, there's such sophomoric people. I mean, really. You're talking about, you're talking about being the sophomore in high school and playing against the guy who's a senior, been doing this a little bit longer than you have. I say that in only this one respect, that I'm the guy that's got the inside track, and so anything that happens down in Douglas, I'm sure I'll hear about it, and we will. I'll make sure that you know about it. So there's a piece in the Turkey Vulture, and it's entitled "3 GOP Educators Seek Wyoming's Superintendent Spot." They're using the word educator kind of loosely. Steve Harshman, I don't know if the word education fits with him. And now he has been a football coach for a long time, but I don't really think that counts as education. I've listened to a lot of sports figures, and I question if any of them ever went to class at all, ever. So education, let's stop throwing that word around all over the place. Here's how it starts. Quote, "The race for Wyoming Superintendent of Public Instruction is heating up with 3 Republicans now." And see, there you go. There they go, using words again that aren't necessarily all that descriptive of folks who are running for office. 3 Republicans. Steve Harshman's in the mix. So I don't really know if Stevie Boy qualifies as a Republican. His voting record certainly doesn't. Continuing. When longtime Casper coach and state legislator Steve Harshman entered the race last week, he joined fellow Republicans Tom Kelly and Chad Auer. Now, Chad Auer is a bureaucrat that was working for Governor Mark Gordon. He was the education policy advisor, I think. And I don't really have all that much information on his credentials. But I mean, he was the governor's policy advisor. So, he's wormed his way into Wyoming education some way, shape, or form. But I'll try to get an interview with him. I mean, I don't know that much about him, except to say that he worked for Governor Gordon. And so that's got to be suspect. I mean, that's a lot like being nominated by President Biden. That Biden's not going to nominate a conservative. There was no way, if you were a conservative in any way, shape, or form, that you were going to be nominated by the Biden administration. I wouldn't want to mention any names. Shane Reeves of the University of Wyoming. By the way, going to try to get him on the show. I think it'll be an interesting discussion. Certainly, he's got a different way of looking at things, so we're trying to get him on the program. And, I'd be excited to talk to him, especially if we could get him in the studio. But, I don't know. He's not... let's just say he doesn't quite align with a lot of the stuff you hear on this program. All right, here we go. 1 of 5 statewide elected officials, the superintendent of public instruction, leads the Wyoming Department of Education. Megan Felder's seat opens as lawsuits, policies, funding decisions, and technological innovation pose major changes to Wyoming's educational landscape. I mean, it sounds like we're terraforming the entire planet in that sentence. The legislature just passed a recalibration bill that represents a new funding model for school districts. Okay, it's not really that hard. Okay, and this is another topic that I don't know. It's not that hard to understand. So for years, decades perhaps, Wyoming school districts have been screaming that we don't have enough money to pay our teachers. You're not paying our teachers enough, and that's why they're leaving. And so the legislature, a couple of years ago, they said, okay, well, we will give teachers and in fact, we'll just give everybody a raise, 8.5%. And it was delivered to the school in the same funding method as always used in a block grant. And there was only one school district, that gave their teachers an 8.5% raise. And actually, they gave around a 10% raise. It was Sublette County. Everybody else did not give their teachers an 8.5% raise, and I don't give a crap about the arguments that they make. Oh, they got more in benefits. We gave them more insurance, and that's a raise. No, it is not. You cannot spend insurance at the grocery store. You cannot use it to pay your mortgage, and you can't use it to fill up your gas tank. That is not a raise. A raise is when your paycheck, the thing that you take to the bank and deposit in your checking account, when it goes up. That is a raise. That is not what 22 other school districts did. And so some state legislators were a wee bit irritated with that. And so they decided, okay, well, we agree. Teachers need more money. And so we are going to, quote, silo the money. And this has been an effort by, real Republicans, conservatives, for a really long time, is to say, look, money that is meant for the classroom has to stay in the classroom. That you can't spend it on football pads or soccer cleats or on basketballs or to put a new floor in the gym. Got to stay in the classroom. And that is what school districts are freaking out about. I actually heard one of them say, well, that means we can't spend our money where we need to. I thought your main purpose was to educate kids. Isn't that where you need to be spending money? Oh, no, we have to be able to fund other... whatever. It's such disingenuous horse crap.
Horse crap.
But anyway, so now all the money is siloed and schools can't just spend it all willy-nilly. The Turkey Vulture says Tom Kelly, who is... I very much like Tom Kelly. He's a little bit too libertarian-minded for me sometimes, but generally speaking, he's a pretty conservative vote. Lives here in Sheridan. We've had him on the program a couple times. Actually, he was the last person that filled in on the program when the lovely Christine and I were out of town. But the Turkey Vulture says Kelly began his career in the classroom as a paraprofessional while he was earning his teaching certificate. A para works under a certified teacher to assist and often works with students with special needs. From there, he spent 10 years teaching social studies and special ed in public schools before transitioning into teaching college part-time and full-time. And then he got a PhD, which if you ask Tom, he will tell you that a PhD stands for nothing more than pile higher and deeper. Kelly currently heads the political science department at American Military University. He holds a master's in education and a doctorate in political science. His family moved to Sheridan from college, and he did not get his PhD or his master's in China, like Megan Felder did. By the way, if you haven't listened to the interview I did with Megan Degenfelder, it's so much easier to just say Megan Felder. Anyway, if you haven't listened to that interview, you really need to. When I asked her why she studied in Beijing, she said that she wanted to learn economics. Wait a minute. So you go to a communist country to study economics? Wow. So anyway, Tom Kelly did not do that. He did not go to Beijing to earn an advanced degree. He did it in the good old US of A. Let's see here. Kelly says... here we go. Kelly said he had been nudged to actively participate in politics as in a professional development tool, as well as by acquaintances who support him. Though he lacks political ambitions, he said, those appeals spurred him to run for office, including Colorado State House as a Libertarian, Sheridan City Council, and then Wyoming Superintendent of Public Instruction, and then as the representative of House District 30, when then Representative Mark Jennings tried his hand at running for the Senate in, I think that was Senate District 21. Anyway, he was defeated by Poisonberry Crago. Excuse me, he was defeated by Americans for Prosperity and not Poisonberry Crago. They outspent him like almost 4-1. The way I had it figured in that race, AFP, Americans for Prosperity, spent around $80,000, and I think Mark spent around 30. So way outspent, and it's just ridiculous. Poisonberry bought that office, and the reason why he bought it is because he couldn't get elected on his merits because he doesn't have any. But I digress. Going into the 2026 season, Kelly was undecided about running for re-election, he said. Then I had several prominent people across the state make some phone calls, visit me in person, and say, would really like to see you in that superintendent position. He didn't want to challenge Megan Felder, he said, but once she announced her run for governor, he decided to go for it. His run for superintendent had nothing to do with his absence during the session. Just days into the session, a back issue became intolerable, and Kelly was forced to return to Sheridan, where he underwent back surgery. So then there's Chad Auer. And by the way, Tom Kelly, great guy. I like him. He would do a fantastic job as superintendent of public instruction. And I mean, much better than Megan Felder, though. I mean, the bar is pretty low on that one. She didn't really do, well, anything while she was in office. All right. So Auer is a senior policy advisor to Governor Go Green Gordon. Up until March, anyway, when he stepped down to pursue the superintendent position. He got his start in education, teaching high school English and math and coaching track, and working with students on alternative paths after encounters with law enforcement. The thing was, he said in a laugh, I was a mediocre teacher. And so now you want to be the superintendent of instruction? So he goes from, isn't that the resume, though? From mediocre teacher to superintendent of public instruction, Megan Degenfelder. Chad Auer, excuse me. Auer went to work for the administration as a principal and in the Colorado Department of Education. So another one from Colorado. Why we need a guy from Colorado teaching or running the Department of Education in Wyoming, Lord only knows. Well, at least Chad Auer thinks so. Nobody else does, but Chad Auer thinks so. Though through the experience in various layers of education and political office, quote, I was able to gain an appreciation for how important policy is and how it impacts the classroom and the day-to-day experience of teachers and students and our parents. Former superintendent of public instruction, Brian Schrader, appointed Auer to the Wyoming Department of Education's chief of staff in 2022. Most recently, he was the senior policy advisor to Mr. Environmentalist himself, Governor Gordon. In addition to prioritizing literacy and math proficiency, Auer said as superintendent, he would prioritize dedicated funding for school resource officers, mental health support, and infrastructure. Whatever infrastructure is. Schools don't have to pay for infrastructure. There are no water lines, no sewer lines, no roads, none of that. They don't even have to pay for transportation. That's all reimbursed by the state. So I don't know what he means by that. And then, my friends, there was Steve Harshman. Old Steve, been in the legislature since Aristotle was writing philosophy. Okay, not that long. But he's also the guy, and let's see if I've got the favorite soundbite here. I don't think I do, but here we go. Here is one of my favorite Steve Harshman sound bites. Now again, he claims to be a Republican. Remember that. Listen to this.
So what's happened in these states that have done caps, and some of them are
Property
wealthy
taxes.
states, but really who's benefited? The rich are going to benefit the most. They're going to benefit the most.
So with tax cuts, it's the rich that benefit the most. So, you little people don't worry about your taxes. You're fine. You're fine. But we can't put any sort of cap on property taxes because it's only going to benefit the rich. So obviously, Steve Harshman knows nothing about education. And even if he did, we wouldn't want him anywhere near the Department of Education. Harshman is the guy that is chiefly responsible for the education funding problem that we have in Wyoming. If there is a dollar that is not nailed down, Harshman will try to put it towards education. And he always makes the argument that we have such great graduation rates in Wyoming. And look at how many kids are graduating. Isn't that fantastic? Well, he never focuses on student outcomes, which is how smart are our kids? What do they know? Do they know their multiplication tables? Can they read a book? Can they write an essay? Those sorts of things. With Harshman, it's all about graduation levels. And somewhere I've got the soundbite of that. But it's completely the opposite of what we need in our education system. Right now, at the 8th grade level, and this is a study that was given to me by Charlie Scott. Charlie Scott's not the person that did the study. He just happened to have it. That roughly half of Wyoming's graduating 8th graders, if 8th graders still graduated, are half of them are not reading at a proficient level. Think about that. Around 50% of the kids that we push through our middle schools can't read proficiently anyway. And then if you look at the same study, the scores get worse the older kids get. And by the time they're a senior in high school, that number is way below 40% who are proficient in reading. And I go back to this a lot, but it wasn't that long ago. I went to Sheridan College and walked into the admissions department and just asked them, hey, what percentage of incoming freshmen from Wyoming schools, which most people that go to a community college are from a Wyoming high school, but I asked them, what percentage have to take remedial courses when they enter college? And they told me it is a staggering 70%. 70% have to take remedial courses before they can get to a college level math course or college level English or any. I mean, that is we should be ashamed of that. Megan Felder too, and in that interview, and maybe I just need to go pull the sound bites so I can play them for you. But I asked Megan Felder twice why she hasn't done anything about the test scores. The first answer she pivoted to talking about China, and I can't remember what she said about the second one, but she never answered the question at all. And as much as and back to Chad Auer, the bureaucrat for the time being. I mean, as much as I liked Brian Schrader personally, I thought he was a pretty good guy. I mean, he didn't really do that great of a job as superintendent of public instruction. Granted, he was filled in a vacancy when who was it? It was Jillian Balow. Yeah, it was Jillian Balow, who's now running for Congress. Interestingly enough, she resigned 4 years to the day before she announced that she was going to run for Wyoming's lone congressional seat. And then took a job in Virginia where she proceeded to screw up their budget too. So to the tune of $2 million. I don't know how you make a $2 million budgetary mistake. Perhaps we should talk to Ilhan Omar. She only made a $30 million mistake. And so you would think that, maybe she could give Jillian Balow some pointers there. Here's how the Turkey Vulture ends their piece, and I quote, "That said, Harshman believes educational standards need examination and simplification." Of course they do. I mean, this is what Harshman does. They need examination and simplification. As superintendent, he aims to responsibly shepherd education funding. We know, old Stevie boy. And to ensure that districts have the tools they need to implement state directives while maintaining local control. All of that is coded language for let's go back to the way we did it before the legislature decided that, okay, if they insist that teachers need to be paid, then maybe we should pay them. I mean, Harshman is absolutely ridiculous. But the thing is, he is so smooth when you talk to him. If you didn't know who he was, you would probably think that this makes sense.
What can be unburdened by what has been. What can be unburdened
it's a speech by Steve Harshman. All right, my friends. Well, let's go ahead and take our second break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about I've got another blast from the past for you. Tracy Stone Manning. She used to run the BLM under Joe Biden. And now there's she's got an op-ed in the Turkey Vulture that I'm going to tell you about. But we'll do that when we come back. But first, an absolutely outrageous profit timeout. Back in a minute. Make sure that you subscribe and follow the Cowboy State Politics podcast. You can do that from the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, or anywhere that you get your podcasts. That way, you'll make sure that you won't miss a single episode of Cowboy State Politics. Hunting season. Right about now, you're off with all of your pals, stalking the big gigantic elk or buck mule deer that you've been thinking about all summer long. And your lovely wife is at home, probably enjoying her time without you. But soon, my friend, all of that is going to come to a screeching halt. And I want you to think about just one little thing. She's able to park her car inside the garage because all of your hunting crap is with you right now. Now, if you'd like the marital bliss to continue, I suggest you make a call to Marcos and Jesse at Morton Buildings. Their phone number is 307-674-2532. They can build you a garage or a barn or any other type of metal structure for you to store all of your toys in so that your wife can continue parking inside the garage. And you can avoid sleeping on the couch for the next month or two. Call Morton Buildings. Their phone number is 307-674-2532. Get them to build you a metal building before it's too late. Welcome back to the program, Cowboy State Politics Live. I'm your host, David Iverson, doing what I was born to do with talent given to me by the guy upstairs. And you'll notice that I say that often. Here's why. Because each of us were given talents by the good Lord, and all of us should take advantage of them. And if you're not taking advantage of the gifts that you've been given, you might want to reconsider things, because God gave you those talents for a reason, and you should use them. And this, my friends, is what I was born to do. I wish I would have discovered it a long time earlier. I've always, I've speech and debate and all that, but I wish I would have discovered broadcasting way before when I did. So anyway, my friends, welcome back to the program. David Iverson, Cowboy State Politics Live. And so there's an op-ed, another one, in the Turkey Vulture. And this one is by someone that you should probably remember, Tracy Stone Manning. You remember her? Well, she was the head of the Bureau of Land Management under Joe Biden. She is the one that's responsible for the Rock Springs RMP. That's the one that tried to cut off, human access, all human access to about 3 million acres down around Rock Springs. And she's also the person that set up the Buffalo RMP that would have essentially stopped coal production, any mineral production in the Powder River Basin, which would have crippled Wyoming's economy. So that is Tracy Stone Manning. But you should also remember her for something else that she did. Back in the 1980s, you remember when there was a rash of, we would call them terrorists right now, but domestic terrorists that were spiking trees in Washington and Idaho. You remember that? Well, what happened? What that means, if you're unfamiliar, spiking a tree is you drive a metal spike into a tree, and then when a chainsaw hits it, the chainsaw bucks, and it almost always kills the person running the chainsaw. And so Tracy Stone Manning was investigated for that, but during her confirmation hearing, she was asked about it, and she pretty much denied portions of it. So here's a video of Josh Hawley, and he's got Tracy Stone Manning in front of him, and he's asking her about the tree spiking. So before we get into her op-ed, I want you to remember who it is that we're dealing with. Now, this is kind of long. It runs about 5 minutes, but it's well worth watching. So check this out.
Director Stone Manning, let me just start with this. When you came before this committee in 2021, this is before I was a member of the committee, you were asked as part of your confirmation whether you'd ever been investigated, arrested, charged by any federal, state, or local law enforcement authority for the violation of any federal, state, or local law, regulation, or ordinance other than a minor traffic offense. We asked that question of all people before the committee. You answered no. Do you stand by that testimony?
Senator, I do stand by that testimony and was proud to be confirmed to do this job.
What's tree spiking, Director?
Senator, again, this committee engaged quite a bit in
No,
this
that's a factual question. Do you know what it is?
And I do. It is.
You want to
when-
tell us? Go ahead.
Yeah, it's when people illegally put metal objects into trees so that they prevent a timber sale.
What happens if a chainsaw hits a spike?
Sometimes when a chainsaw hits a spike, it can buck the saw.
Yeah, violently recoil, potentially kill or seriously maim the loggers.
Yeah, which is why I notified the federal authorities that I had heard that happened.
Loggers, like, for instance,
Now listen to
George
this.
Alexander, this
This
is from
crazy.
an article on the
Just
Washington
wait, here in a
Post
minute, he's
explaining
going
what
to read
happens
she
when
sent to the
trees
committee-
get
to the,
spiked. Loggers who
to
are
the,
blue-collar
federal
workers, by the
authorities.
way. These are not wealthy people. These are not people who have had the advantages perhaps you and others have had. People like George Alexander, who, for example, in May 1987, at age 23, his chainsaw hit a tree spike. I'm quoting, his face was slashed from eye to chin, his teeth were smashed, his jaw was cut in half. That's a typical reaction when a logger hits a spike. Now, you just said, I think just a second ago, that you were involved. There were 2 people convicted in 1989 of putting 500 pounds of spikes in an Idaho forest. Senator Rich mentioned this just a moment ago. You testified you sent a letter to the Forest Service on their behalf. I have it here. The letter says, among other things, this letter sent to notify you that the post office sale, that's the forest sale in Idaho, has been spiked heavily. The reason for this action is that this piece of land is very special to the earth. It is home to the elk, deer, mountain lions, birds, and especially the trees. It goes on, I would be more than willing to pay you $1 for the sale, but you'd have to find me first, and that could be your worst nightmare. P.S. You bastards go in there anyway, and a lot of people could get hurt. Why'd you send this?
Senator, as I said at the time, over 30 years ago, a really angry and turns out violent person handed me that letter and said, will you send this to the Forest Service?
And you did. Why?
What you just talked about in 1987 to a logger, this is 1988, 9. I understood that people could get hurt.
Why didn't you notify the federal authorities?
I was-
Why did you send this threatening letter on behalf of these 2 men who were convicted of crimes?
I was terrified of them and wanted no involvement with them.
So you wanted no involvement, but you sent a letter that says you bastards go in there anyway, and a lot of people could get hurt? Why didn't you just contact the FBI or anybody, any local authority?
Because the person who did this act threatened people's lives if they disclosed who did it.
Yeah, in fact, you were investigated for being involved, weren't you?
Listen to this.
Here we have a letter sent to this committee from the special agent of the USDA Forest Service, Michael Merkley, who was in charge of the investigation. He says, and he details this in the letter to this committee, that he investigated you for your involvement. He says, and I'm going to quote now, grand jury subpoenas were issued for hair samples, handwriting exemplars, fingerprints. These subpoenas were served on persons suspected of being involved, having knowledge of the incident, including Ms. Tracy Stone Manning. You've testified you were never investigated, ever, for anything. Why'd you lie to this committee?
Senator, this committee delved deeply, went into the court records where I testified against these men.
Were you issued subpoenas?
No.
You were not issued
Well,
subpoenas?
I was issued a subpoena to appear before
she
a
is
grand
lying.
jury. With,
Really?
with
Because
about 13
here's what he
people.
says. Ms. Stone Manning was extremely difficult to work with. She was antagonistic. She was uncooperative, refused to provide her hair, handwriting exemplars, and fingerprints as ordered by the grand jury. It was not until after we informed her she would be arrested if she did not comply with the subpoenas that she provided the samples to me. So you were
Senator
subpoenaed.
Hawley,
You
your
were
time
the
has
target of an
expired.
investigation.
Do you have a question?
You were the target of an investigation. You lied to this committee. Why?
Senator, I never received a target letter. I'm curious. I understand.
All right. That's enough there. So the point is, Tracy Stone Manning, absolutely a partisan hack. Absolutely tried to shut down mineral development in the western United States, specifically in Wyoming. Well, she's got a new op-ed out. And this one is entitled, and the Turkey Vulture printed this crazy thing, but it's entitled, Dismantling the U.S. Forest Service Harms Public Lands and Communities. Now, remember, it was back in the 1980s that Tracy Stone Manning was spiking trees, not tried to, she did, spike trees. She sent threatening letters to law enforcement and to the Forest Service. Well, now she's the defender of the Forest Service. Here's what she said. When I led the Bureau of Land Management under President Biden, the hardest part of my job was reassembling the agency after the first Trump administration had scattered its headquarters from our nation's capital. The move crippled the agency as intended. So wait a minute. So the headquarters of the Forest Service was in Washington, D.C. There aren't a lot of forests in Washington, D.C. I mean, there are some around when you get down to Appalachia. This is true. But most of the Forest Services, the National Forest, that the Forest Service is in charge of is not in the eastern United States. It's in the West. Namely, Wyoming, Montana, Idaho, Washington, those places. And, there are some national forests in the eastern United States, but they pale in comparison. But she's saying that the move crippled the agency to put the department where it actually works. That experience led me to understand that the current Trump administration's unpopular move to move the Forest Service headquarters will be every bit as destructive. It will hurt forests, wildlife, and communities that rely on our public lands and waters. How is moving the headquarters of an agency going to hurt wildlife, forests, and communities? Seems to me that it might put the people working on the forest right where they're supposed to be working, near a forest. In 2020, continuing now, almost 90% of the BLM employees ordered to move west chose not to. Good. Forcing them out the door, which they weren't forced out the door. Said, hey, we're moving everything. If you want to keep working, you got to move there. And that happens all the time in corporate America. Don't tell me that this is an outrageous move by the Trump administration. Companies all the time decide to move their headquarters, and if you want to continue working, you got to come to some sort of arrangement with them. You either move, or you work remotely, or you don't work for them. Manning continues. The Forest Service and the BLMs combined manage 20% of our country's lands and water. These public lands, like the places we camp, hike, watch birds, hunt, and simply wander in nature, are truly one of America's best ideas. For Westerners, they are a deep part of our identity. There's a reason Forest Service headquarters are based in Washington, D.C. It's where our nation's leaders work, not where the trees are, but where the leaders are. Believe me, I didn't want to move the capital from my home in Montana to run the BLM, but wait a minute. So Stone Manning moved to D.C. to work for the Forest Service. Why is it so outrageous that some employees of the Forest Service are asked to move the other direction? Let's see here. I was often in the Interior Secretary's offices. I frequently walked to work with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service director, talking through thorny problems as to how to protect wildlife while permitting transmission lines. Now, there wasn't a lot of permits that went through under Stone Manning. The administration says that their changes are about bringing leadership closer to where the work happens. That's a political talking point. And it's false. No, wait a minute. Moving the headquarters to a place where there's actually a national forest is not about moving where the work actually happens. The person who's full of crap is Tracy Stone Manning, and she has been for a very, very, very long time. And if you go to YouTube, you can find several different interactions between Tracy Stone Manning and John Barrasso and Representative Hageman. I mean, actually, they're truly entertaining, if you ask me. All right, so I went ahead and opened up the phone lines, and so if you want to be part of the program, the number in the studio, and I'll put it here at the bottom of the screen, is 307-374-8989. If there's something you want to talk about or you got something on your mind, go ahead and give me a call, 307-374-8989. I've been gone for a couple days, so I've kind of unplugged a little bit, though I got some of the headlines. But give me a call. Now, one of the it's the main article on the Open Range Record right now is about a group called Protect Wyoming. And anytime you hear a group with a flowery or rainbow sounding name to them, they're always suspect, always. There's a reason why a group is named the way that it is, and any of them that sound great, you should look into them. I mean, there was one a couple of years ago that was like Friends of Coal. Okay, all right, sounds good, especially if you're in Campbell County, Wyoming, or Wyoming in general. But you look into it, and it was absolutely an environmentalist organization that was fighting for clean coal, with scrubbers and all of that. So definitely look into all of these groups. And this Protect Wyoming group is among them. And it's run by this guy named Zach Lynch, Lentzsch. Now, the funny part about him is he says that this group is to rate legislators on how much they support public lands, and that there's a lot of legislators that they're not in favor of public lands and wildlife and keep public lands in public hands and all of that jazz. And he says that he's in support of real Wyoming things. The truth is that old Zachy boy, Zach Lynch, he's a Bernie Sanders supporter, or at least he was. From the Open Range Record, an article entitled "Protect Wyoming is Really Protecting an Agenda." This is a great piece, and it goes through exactly what they do and what they don't do. But here's the part about Bernie Sanders. And I quote, "The narrower lane becomes easier to understand when viewed alongside the public record of Protect Wyoming's co-founder, Zach Lynch. In 2016, NPR interviewed him ahead of the Wyoming Democratic Caucus and identified him as a Wyoming Democrat and Bernie Sanders supporter. During the interview, Lynch told NPR, and I quote, "The short story is that I feel that Bernie Sanders is the only candidate on either side of the aisle speaking real truth to power." As someone who grew up in Wyoming, and how he could grow up in Wyoming and support Bernie Sanders, I have no idea. But I think a lot of Sanders supporters here feel similarly. We're kind of on the precarious periphery of sorts of mainstream politics. And that gives us a very critical outsider's perspective about what's going on and the establishment. So in other words, Zach Lynch admits that he's a Bernie Sanders supporter, and two, he himself says that he is on the political periphery, meaning that he's not in line with mainstream Wyoming values. Nor do I think that there's that many Bernie Sanders supporters in Wyoming, but Zachy boy is one of them. Now, admittedly, in 2016, he was in college. In 2018, he was not registered to vote in Wyoming, and he didn't vote in the general election, nor did he vote in the primary. And he didn't vote in the general election. In 2020, he was registered as an unaffiliated voter. And in 2022, though I know that you'll all be shocked and amazed, he was registered as a Republican. And so, I mean, that's him, right? So the group that the Wyoming media is going bat crap crazy over, oh, look at this guy. Isn't he great? He's rating these Wyoming legislators according to Wyoming lands. Uh-huh. And wouldn't you know, the only people that get a good grade out of his organization are liberal redcoats. That's awfully coincidental, wouldn't you say? Well, the truth is that his rating system is set up that way. And it's entirely arbitrary. Let me read you a couple of pieces here, and this is from the piece on the Open Range Record. It says, and I quote, then there's Protect Wyoming's legislative scorecard. The group says that it scored lawmakers using bills from 25 and 26, and they picked 7 of them. So first, they're cherry-picking bills. There are a ton of bills that go through the Wyoming legislature on a variety of different topics. And if you only choose 6, what is the likelihood that the 6 that you chose portray one side or the other in a particular way? So, for example, if you're a conservative on those bills, it was easy to paint them as, negatively, to penalize them. Quoting again, at first glance, it may sound straightforward, but it's not. On some measures, the group's scores final floor votes, or the final vote on the bill. But on others, its own scorecard says that lawmakers were penalized for just sponsoring the bill or for committee action, even when those bills never even reached the final passage. For Senate File 118, which, by the way, in the article, there are links to all of these bills. You can go read them for yourself. For Senate File 118, the scorecard says that the bill did not receive a final vote, but sponsors still received a -3 for it. It's the same story for House Bill 286, no final vote, but sponsors were still penalized. For Senate File 51, the bill failed introduction, was never introduced on the floor, and wasn't introduced to a committee, and yet it was still used to score legislators. In other words, Protect Wyoming penalized legislators regardless of their final vote on the bill to give preferred candidates a favorable score. Now, there's nothing illegal about doing this. PACs can do pretty much whatever they want, and they can score people however they want. But you need to know what you're looking at. And the truth is that this Protect Wyoming outfit is no different than the political weapon that is Better Wyoming. Better Wyoming is run by Carly Provenza's husband, Nate Martin, and it's nothing more than a tool for the Democrat Party. Now they've got out this whole thing. Who got checks from Rebecca Bextel? Nobody got a check from Rebecca. She didn't write them. She did hand them out, but she's not the one that wrote the checks. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with that. It's a constitutionally protected expression of free speech. And so, Better Wyoming, though they purport to be a fair organization, they're no different than these Protect Wyoming jokers. Continuing here. Protect Wyoming also leans heavily on the phrase scientific management, though they don't really tell you what that is. But that phrase does more political work than the group admits. Take House Bill 186 in 2025. Protect Wyoming labels it as an anti-scientific management bill. The actual bill, Bear Coupons, Game and Fish, was part of a genuine policy dispute over grizzly bear management, delisting, and state authority. It didn't really have anything to do with, whether the bear should be delisted or not. It was a bill to, allow Wyoming to have some control over the grizzly bear population, which, by the way, is absolutely exploding in Wyoming. But anyway, they let's see here. In House Bill 286, mountain lion hunting season changes was another real policy dispute. Labeling one side of such debates as anti-science doesn't settle the issue. It simply brands one side as legitimate and the other side as backwards. So in other words, this Protect Wyoming outfit is nothing more than a partisan tool to attack conservatives. Now, the Wyoming media, they went bonkers over this thing. At one point, Rod Miller, who is not a journalist and not really anybody that you should pay attention to, but Rod Miller said called them, quote, cowboy as hell. The reason Rod Miller likes them is that Protect Wyoming scores liberal legislators, pretty highly, and it scores conservatives pretty negatively. And so the piece is up on the Open Range Record. It's a great article by Don Marquardt, one of our great journalists at the Open Range Record. And let me just drop the link here in the comments so you can go check it out. It's a great piece. In fact, we're doing a lot of really great journalism at the Open Range Record. And you should really spend some time on there. I mean, it's reporting that you're not going to hear anywhere else. And we try to shoot it straight. There's opinion on there too. That's absolutely the case. But for the most part, what's news is labeled as news. What's opinion is labeled as opinion. And if you think we're wrong, go ahead and contact us. Say, hey, David, I don't think this is news. I think this is opinion. You need to change that, and we'll listen to you. That's very different than what you get from the mainstream media. Really what they do is what's called advocacy or opinion journalism, advocacy journalism. It's not really journalism at all. It's opinion that is wrapped up to look like news. There's no better example than the cow pie. That most of the news articles they publish are nothing more than opinion. let's kind of switch gears a little bit. And you know what? We're going to take an early break, and we'll be back in just a second. So stick with me. We'll be back in a minute. Are you tired of all the meaningless political drivel floating around right now? Endless commentary that really doesn't have anything backing it up? Do you long for the days of true investigative journalism coming from an authoritative source who really doesn't care how popular and apparently good-looking a politician is? Fortunately for you, that's what I do on Cowboy State Politics. New episodes are published every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday, and you can get them anywhere that you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, really any of them will work. But the easiest way is just to go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com. There, you can find all of the shows, as well as any of the articles I might bring up during the course of the program. Cowboy State Politics Live, the program you're listening to right now, is broadcast every Tuesday through Friday, beginning at 8 a.m. Pay attention to all of that other block-headed nonsense if you want. Just make sure that you don't miss an episode of Cowboy State Politics. And now, back to our program. Thank you for that unplanned break. I didn't want to cough into the microphone. But welcome back to the program. If you're just now joining us, see, there we go again. If you're just now joining us, the phone number here in the studio, phone lines are open. Go ahead and give me a call. The phone number is 307-374-8989. And unlike normal rules during the week, whatever's on your mind, we'll talk about it. And by the way, don't miss tomorrow's installment of the broadcast. It's Open Line Friday. We'll have one day of the convention in the books, and so there will be certainly lots of stuff to talk about. So tomorrow's Open Line Friday. Anything you want to talk about all program long, you just whatever's on your mind, we'll do it. So I hope that you've been watching what's been happening in Virginia. And this has been, actually, it's kind of been reverberating across the country, but it is Democrat-run states who are redistricting. Now, normally, you don't redistrict unless there's a new census. But because of what Texas did, there was a redistricting effort there, and then there's a lawsuit filed against it. Of course, they took it to court, and the Supreme Court ruled that the Texas map is good to go. And so people like Gavin Newsom and the socialist Spamberger in Virginia said, well, we've got to do something to counteract what these Republicans are doing. We can't have more Republicans in Congress than we do Democrats. And so we've got to redistrict. And so they did. And if you looked at the map, they took, and Virginia is funny. So when Barack Obama, during his second election, he won one county in Virginia. And that was enough to carry the entire state. And it was Alexandria. And just that one county in Virginia was enough to carry the entire state of Virginia and hand those electoral votes off to Barack Obama. And so from pretty much Roanoke west, it's a pretty conservative area. I used to live, and it's funny that this whole thing is is going down in the county that I lived in. But here's a tweet from Ken Cuccinelli, who was the Attorney General for the state of Virginia. And he posted last night on X, quote, "The Tazewell Circuit Court just ruled the referendum unconstitutional. The judge entered an injunction blocking certification of the election and denied a motion to stay pending appeal. A final order will be entered once drafted, and it will be immediately appealed." And so the election happened yesterday, and voters approved the redistricting plan, mostly because of the way that it was written. The actual ballot question said, "To make elections more fair, would you approve redistricting?" Well, the truth is, when you looked at the redistricting map, they took a major portion of the western half of Virginia and made it one congressional district. That means there's one representative for almost half a state. Now, in Wyoming, you might say, well, that's no big deal. We only have one representative here. Well, the truth is, we've only got 580,000 people that live in the entire state. There's way more than that live in the western half of Virginia. And so they took away a couple of congressional districts that are pretty conservative districts and made it all one district, so there's only one representative. And then the rest of them are Democrat districts. And so they absolutely took away representation from a lot of Virginians. And so it was appealed, and a judge in the county that I used to live in, Tazewell County, it's really rural. Actually a real pretty place to live. But if you live there, it would remind you a lot of many places in Wyoming. It's not a lot of people that live there, pretty sparse, countryside, farming land. Yeah, there are a bunch of rednecks there. But and by the way, I'll never accuse anybody in Wyoming of being a redneck ever again. Frankly, we got nothing on those people. But anyway, so from Breitbart, judge blocks Virginia from certifying results of redistricting referendum. And I quote, "A Tazewell County, Virginia judge issued a ruling blocking Virginia from moving forward with certifying the results of the special election regarding a redistricting referendum that could possibly allow Democrats to gain 4 congressional seats. In the ruling from the Tazewell Circuit Court Judge Jack Hurtley, issued on Wednesday, the judge explained that, quote, "The process underlying the referendum broke several state laws and that certifying the votes would harm Republican lawmakers in the state." The Tazewell County Circuit Court does the following. Tyler Englander, a Virginia State Capitol reporter on ABC 8, wrote, "To declare that any and all votes for or against the proposed constitutional amendment on April 21st of 2026 special election are ineffective. It enjoins defendants and their successors from certifying the results from April 21st. The ruling by the court comes after the redistricting referendum passed 1.5 million, representing 51.5% of the tally, to 1.486 million votes that were cast against it, representing 48.5. As a result of the referendum passing, Virginia's congressional delegation could go from a closely divided 6-5 split to heavily Democratic-leaning 10-1 advantage. So they completely upended representation in conservative counties. Let's see here. In a post on X, Virginia Attorney General Jay Jones, he's the radical George Soros Attorney General, said his office would, quote, "immediately file an appeal," and added that, quote, "an activist judge should not have the veto power over the people's vote." Well, if you've deceived the people with an absolutely misleading ballot question, then yeah, he absolutely should. Quote, "My office will immediately file an appeal in the Court of Appeals," Jones said. As I said last night, Virginia voters have spoken, and an activist judge should have no veto power in the state. Well, this one is an important one to watch, because one of the arguments that will be made, and probably already is being made, is that that, well, the people have spoken, and if Texas can do it, so can we. And so, I mean, absolutely ridiculous. And I see no reason why any judge really should even be allowed. I mean, why any judge wouldn't strike this thing down, because, I mean, it was a midterm. redistricting effort. There were several things they did wrong. I mean, that one congressional district for that many people. And what I should have done is got a map for you guys to show you this. But Trumpy has a solution. I don't know if this one will work, but it's creative nonetheless. From Fox News. Trump has a bold option to counter Virginia's new gerrymandering scheme. By the way, you know why it's pronounced gerrymandering and not gerrymandering? Because it was named after Eldridge Gerry, a legislator he was the first one to draw a really crazy congressional district, and it looked like a salamander. And so they called it gerrymandering. But how you pronounce it, it's Eldridge Gerry. It's not Eldridge Gerry. So, everybody pronounces it gerrymandering, but it's really not. All right. Anyway, former President Barack Obama urged Virginians to vote yes in the state's upcoming redistricting measure, arguing that it would, quote, level the playing field and push back against Republican efforts ahead of the midterms. If you're proud of something, you want people to see it. And that's why it's telling that Virginia Democrats are asking Old Dominion residents to vote for a redistricting scheme without allowing their proposed map to be printed on the ballot. So in other words, voters didn't get to see what the ballot would, what the map would look like. Instead, they were just told, hey, to make this more fair, you should vote for this thing. Let's see here. But it's no wonder that the mid-decade redistricting proposal, and this is why this is unusual, because they're redistricting in the middle of a decade, and normally you only do this when there's a census, so you know where populations have changed. Will wipe out all but one GOP-leaning congressional district in the state, and of course they claim it's all done in the name of democracy. The dishonest power play seeks to make congressional representation of a purple state nearly as blue as Massachusetts. It disenfranchises nearly half of the Commonwealth. Virginia went 51.8% to 46% for Vice President Kamala Harris in 2024. The proposed districts are extreme, running from heavily populated blue areas deep into rural red areas. Federal government employees in Arlington and Fairfax will essentially dictate the congressional representation of farmers and shopkeepers up to 100 miles away. Local airwaves, and in Virginia, 100 miles is a long ways. There's a lot of people that live in that distance. Local airwaves have been inundated with ads pushing this redistricting scheme as a benevolent attempt to save democracy and, quote, free and fair elections. One ubiquitous ad features former President Barack Obama, carrying on his tradition for honesty that was exemplified in his infamous declaration. If you like your plan, you can keep your plan. Now, if you like your district, you can keep your district. Right. With the hollow promise of going back to Virginia's regular redistricting process in 2030. Materials provided to the grassroots are a bit more transparent than the types of phony appeals to democracy wielded by the former president, governor, and other scheming progressives. Yard signs supporting the initiative are much more clear about the intent of the initiative, urging voters to fight back against MAGA. It's obvious that anyone paying attention that rather than an effort to restore fairness or a level playing field or any of that jazz, that the Virginia gerrymander or Virginia Vergerrymander is nothing more than an effort to stack the deck in favor of Democrats and to weaken President Trump. That's all that it is, my friends. And thankfully, that judge in Tazewell County decided to do away with it. I had to grab that piece of paper here. But here is one of the administration's plans. Don't know if it could work. But President Trump could issue an executive order declaring the slavery-motivated retrocession unconstitutional, triggering certain legal action and allowing the courts to finally weigh in on whether the county of Arlington and the city of Alexandria in fact properly belong to the District of Columbia. This order would be on better legal footing than many of President Joe Biden's most egregious orders, such as those imposing an eviction moratorium or forgiving billions in student debt with the stroke of an auto pen. As some of the deepest blue areas of the Commonwealth and the country, and loaded with federal government employees, residents of this region could feel right at home as part of the District of Columbia. If Virginia Democrats redistricting succeeds, President Trump should redistrict Virginia. And it will not only neutralize the president's political opponents, move to stack Congress against him, but it would protect the representation of those people that live in Virginia. So there you go. Make the heavily populated Alexandria the only Virginia county in the second election of Barack Obama that he actually won. Think of what that would have done. I mean, in that election, it was actually pretty, a little bit closer than the media lays it out to be, but it would have switched that entire state to the Republicans. Let's see here. And here's another piece that I don't know if you've seen this or not, but it's also from Breitbart. From the White House. You know what? Actually, I just looked at the clock, and let's go to our third break. And when we come back, we'll finish up the program. Back in a minute. Yeah, I know. The weather seems to be toying with us. 60 one day, 42 the next, and pretty soon, my friends, those 6s and 4s are going to turn into 3s and 2s. Though we all want to avoid it, that white stuff is coming, my friends, and you will be shoveling the walk in it. It's cold, it's unpleasant, and nobody likes to do it. But you could make it just a little bit more comfortable and prevent your feet from turning into a giant block of ice. In fact, you could keep them nice and warm and toasty, and your toes will never even know that they're outside. The rest of you may be frozen solid, but at least your feet won't be. To make all this happen, you just need a pair of socks from the Buffalo Wool Company. They are the finest socks that I've ever put on my feet. To get you a pair, go to their website, thebuffalowoolco.com. Trust me, you won't be disappointed. Are you one of those guys that listen to the president just a little bit too closely and now you're tired of winning? Are you getting the feeling that there's been way too many good things happening in our country and you just can't take it anymore? Well, if you are, and you think you should follow Rosie O'Donnell's example and get the heck out of Dodge, you need to call Rebecca Bextel at eXp Realty. She'll make those foreign country living ideas a reality for you. All you have to do is call 307-699-3519, and she'll make sure some freedom-loving, red-blooded American will now live in the home that you no longer want. If you want to sell your house, or if you want to buy one that's way better than the house you have right now, give Rebecca a call. Again, her phone number is 307-699-3519.
I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day, don't you? Well, I can show you how. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day. I'm only gonna get stronger.
Cowboy State Politics is only getting stronger. This program is expanding faster than, well, I don't really know what, but it's getting pretty big with the Cowboy State Politics podcast, Cowboy State Politics Live, and, of course, the Open Range Record. Thank you for watching, my friends. And by the way, if you have not downloaded the mobile app for the Open Range Record, it's available on Android and on Apple. It's pretty handy. And it's really simple. That's the thing that I like about it. It's a piece of cake. And it'll send you notifications when there's a new article posted. But unlike some of the other news apps that just inundate you and like all day long, you just get nothing but notifications. This one, it's only when there's a new article that's posted, And, during the session, we were posting like 3 and 4 articles a day. Now it's, maybe it's usually 1, maybe 2. I've got a couple of pieces I'm going to publish after today's program. Well, I've actually got a couple of errands to run, but I'll do that and then come back to the house and publish a couple new pieces for you. But definitely go check out that Protect Wyoming one. It's pretty fascinating what liberals will do and the lengths that they'll go to try to confuse Wyoming voters. And here's the thing, there's been a lot of these fake rating sites that have popped up, and what it is a reaction to conservatives, because there are a couple of credible outfits in the state that really do diligently try to rate bills. One of them is Wyoming. A lot of people don't like that one because it's focused on the Republican Party platform. And another one is called Vote. That one is more holistic. In my mind, it's the most accurate. But it rates legislators from super conservative to really liberal. Their scores aren't out yet, but when I get an update on those, I'll let you know. But it's a response to all these rating sites that show pretty much all the same thing, that there's a whole bunch of redcoats in Cheyenne that claim to be Republicans, and they're really not. And their voter, like one of them, Marilyn Connolly in House District 40, that's in Johnson County, I think. And the other rating site is Evidence-Based Wyoming. How could I forget that one? That one shows Marilyn Connolly voted with the Democrats almost 80% of the time. The big joke in the gallery during the first week or 2 of the session was, I think Marilyn's gone full-blown Democrat. That's the way she votes. And that is not. And a lot of these folks that are running for re-election, they've got a voting record now. Elisa Campbell, Julie Jarvis, Marilyn Connolly. It'd be pretty easy for one of their opponents to just print everything out and then show up at somebody's doorstep. And, when they say, oh, no, Elisa Campbell, she told me she's a conservative. And you could pull out the book and say, where would you like me to begin? Shall we begin with abortion or transgender stuff or birth certificates or anything like that? We could start anywhere there. There's guns. That would be great. And just show them, hey, here's how she voted. Make up your own mind. If that's the thing that represents you, then you go for it. So there's another story that's developing. It started yesterday, I think. I heard about it on the way back from my fruitless hunting expedition. But there is a criminal indictment against the Southern Poverty Law Center. And it should be front page news everywhere. And I quote, this is from Breitbart. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt on Wednesday said the Southern Poverty Law Center is a criminal organization, and according to a grand jury indictment, and that the allegations from the Department of Justice has brought against it should be front page news to everybody. And it all goes back to Charlottesville. The one thing that they beat President Trump over the head with, that he said they were all very, very fine people. They're all fine people, is what they accused him of saying. When in reality, during that same speech, he denounced the KKK and all white supremacists, and he said they should be. I can't remember how he put it. I'm looking for the soundbite right now so that I can play it for you. But during both elections, they beat President Trump over the head with that Charlottesville thing. In fact, Joe Biden said that's what convinced him to run for office. And the media piled on, and it was like nonstop. Trump says they're very fine people that were on both sides, if you remember that. And let's see here. Let me just look real care, peaceful and patriotically. Okay, that's the other one. Man, there's a lot of Trump stuff on here. Charlottesville, here we go. So let's go ahead and listen to this one. This is the longer version of what Trump actually said during that speech, the one that he's accused of. Now, I'm going to tell you what the indictment's about right after you listen to this. So let's see here. Yep, here we go. Check it out.
Putting what you're calling the alt-left and
It's about 2 minutes, but listen to it.
I'm not putting anybody on a moral plane. What I'm saying is this. You had a group on one side and you had a group on the other, and they came at each other with clubs, and it was vicious, and it was horrible, and it was a horrible thing to watch. But there is another side. There was a group on this side, you can call them the left, you've just called them the left, that came violently attacking the other group. So you can say what you want, but that's the way it is.
On both sides, sir? You said there was hatred, there was violence on both sides.
Well, I do think there's blame. Yes, I think there's blame on both sides. You look at both sides. I think there's blame on both sides, and I have no doubt about it, and you don't have any doubt about it either. And if you reported it accurately, you would say.
Neo-Nazis started this. They showed up in Charlottesville to protest.
Neo-Nazis, remember that.
And you had some very bad people in that group. But you also had people that were very fine people on both sides.
Okay, so that's the soundbite right there that the media played over and over and over again. Trump saying there's very fine people on both sides. Here's the part that they didn't play for you, the end of what he said. Now, remember, he started out this whole conversation saying how terrible the KKK and white supremacist people were. And then he says, but there was very fine people on both sides. Here's the rest of it.
You had people in that group, excuse me, I saw the same pictures as you did. You had people in that group that were there to protest the taking down of, to them, a very, very important statue and the renaming of a park from Robert E. Lee to another name.
Robert E. Lee are not the same.
Well, no, George Washington was a slave owner. Was George Washington a slave owner? So will George Washington now lose his status? Are we going to take down, excuse me, are we going to take down statues to George Washington? How about Thomas Jefferson? What do you think of Thomas Jefferson? You like him?
I do.
Okay, good. Are we going to take down the statue? Because he was a major slave owner. Now we're going to take down his statue. So you know what? It's fine. You're changing history, you're changing culture, and you had people, and I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists, because they should be condemned totally.
Okay, there it is, right? They should be condemned totally. That's the part that the media didn't play for you. Now, remember the and you can hear Jim Acosta in the background. He's the rabid ankle-biting dog that was after Trump all the time during the first administration. Well, as it turns out, the Southern Poverty Law Center, the folks that were saying that school board members are domestic terrorists and that conservatives really were just white nationalists, remember all of that? Turns out the Southern Poverty Law Center was funding the neo-Nazis and the KKK members to get them to rise up. Here's what Breitbart says, and I quote, Levitt responded to Breitbart News' question about the White House's reaction to the Southern Poverty Law Center indictment. Quote, yeah, I saw the indictment yesterday. I saw the acting attorney general and the FBI director do a press conference on it. It was quite shocking to me to learn of the egregious violations of the Southern Poverty Law Center. And I think that's a story that should be on the front page of every newspaper in this country because they've obviously been duping their supporters and the American taxpayers for far too long. It's a criminal organization, clearly. And that's not our DOJ saying that or Todd Blanche saying that. That's a grand jury indictment saying that. As Breitbart News noted, the DOJ announced that an Alabama grand jury indicted the Southern Poverty Law Center with 11 counts of wire fraud, false statements to a federally insured bank, and conspiracy to commit concealment money laundering. According to the indictment, starting in the 1980s, the SPLC, the Southern Poverty Law Center, began operating a covert network of individuals who were either associated with violent or extremist groups such as the KKK, or who had infiltrated violent extremist groups at the SPLC's direction. Unbeknownst to donors, some of their donated money was being used to fund the leaders and organizers of racist groups at the same time that the SPLC was denouncing the same groups on its website. The DOJ contends that the SPLC funneled over $3 million to individuals associated with the Ku Klux Klan, Unite the Right, the Aryan Nations, affiliated Sadistic Souls Motorcycle Club, the National Socialist Party of America, and the American Nazi Party, and others associated with extremist groups between 2014 and 2023. So during the time that they were going after President Donald Trump for this Charlottesville riot. As it turns out, it was a left-leaning organization, the Southern Poverty Law Center, that was funneling money to these people. And all the while, they're accusing President Trump of saying there's very fine people on both sides. The Southern Poverty Law Center allegedly engaged in a massive fraud operation to deceive their donors, enrich themselves, and hide their deceptive operations from the public, said FBI Director Kash Patel. They lied to their donors, vowing to dismantle violent extremist groups, and actually turned around and paid the leaders of these very groups, even utilizing the funds to have these groups facilitate the commission of state and federal crimes. And so, in other words, you had an organization that was creating their own material. So they're funding these extremist groups on the one hand. And then, and here's the thing, without money, these groups end up dying. And they're in the extreme minority anyway. And, are there racists everywhere? Yeah, sure there are. But they're absolutely in the minority. Are there KKK members still? Yeah, I suppose. There were, where I lived at in Virginia, there were definitely a few. But they're in the extreme minority. But it is the media and folks like the Southern Poverty Law Center that want you to believe that these groups are on the rise. I was listening to the radio on the way back from the turkey hunt, and there was a study that the Southern Poverty Law Center said, well, excuse me, before I get to the study. And it was an interview with Dana Perino from Fox News, and she was talking to Mark Levin about her new book, which I may have to order her book. I think it sounds pretty interesting. Anyway, and she was saying, well, the Southern Poverty Law Center came out, and they said that there are a bunch of white supremacists in the U.S. military, and a shocking statement. And if it were true, it would be outrageous. But as it turns out, when they said that they were going to do a study of this and find out how many people were in the military. As it turns out, when they did the study, it was released at 10 p.m. on a Friday. Okay, when you're in the media business, you release things that are embarrassing on a Friday late at night so they don't get the attention, and that they skip the major news cycle, and then by the time Monday rolls around, it's an old article. But what their study showed is actually in the U.S. military is the lowest amount of people that are members of these fringe groups. It showed exactly the opposite of what they were claiming. The whole while, it's the same Southern Poverty Law Center that's been funding all of these groups. And so, in other words, it's here, we'll give you money to keep operating. And by the way, on our website, we're going to tell everybody you're a pile of crap. But here, take our money and continue doing your things. But this is one of the chief ways that the left operates, that they have to gin up a controversy so that they have something to fight against. And that is exactly what that is. And you remember, so during the Biden administration, there was they came out and they said there's all of these extremist groups, and it was media people and churches and Fox News, and all of these people are extremist groups. Well, that was information that was coming from the Southern Poverty Law Center, and they're the folks that at one time they were one of the loudest voices saying that, look, this is where you can find violent extremism, and now we find out that they indeed were the folks funding it. It's when you look into things, you can find stuff like that. Just like the Wyoming media should have looked into this Protect Wyoming outfit, and they would have found that the dude is a Bernie Sanders supporter. But you can't count on the media, the mainstream media anyway, to report anything that's the truth. Here's another one. From The Blaze, liberal media silent as Senate proves the FBI spied on the GOP without evidence as soon as Biden took his oath of office. And this is from The Blaze, and here we go. Senator Chuck Grassley has obtained new documents revealing that the Biden FBI targeting of GOP lawmakers in the wake of January 6th protests was not limited to Operation Arctic Frost, but rather was part of a pattern of political weaponization. The documents obtained by Grassley and published by the Daily Caller provide insights into the nature and baselessness of the Biden FBI's rampant 12 investigation, which was initially pursued against Republican representatives Lauren Boebert, Paul Gosar, Andy Biggs, as well as against former member Mo Brooks by the Washington Bureau's field office. Quote, my Democrat colleagues want to ignore these facts and evidence and defend the fired officials who participated in Biden's lawfare. As with Arctic Frost, this Biden FBI lawfare campaign saw investigators obtain toll records, at least for Boebert and Gosar. Toll records provide investigators with identifying information of callers, along with the date, time, location, and length of call. And if you know anything about metadata, you know that you don't actually have to have the data itself. As long as you know who the person called, where they were at when they called, where the location of the other person was when they received the call, and the length of the call, you can deduce pretty much everything you want to know from that. You don't actually have to record the phone call. This is what after the Patriot Act, this is what the NSA engaged in. You remember that whole controversy? Well, we're not recording phone calls. We're just recording the metadata. Yeah, well, it's the metadata that tells you everything you need to know. Well, this is what the FBI was doing to members of the GOP members of Congress. For example, Cheryl, now the governor of New Jersey, alleged that in January 2021 video shared to Facebook that some lawmakers had brought groups of people into the Capitol ahead of January 6th to conduct reconnaissance for the next day. Text messages between prosecutors reveal a desire by elements of the Biden Justice Department to advance the case despite an awareness that proving the Republicans' intended harm when supposedly bringing people to the Capitol might be impossible, and that some of the imagery cited by the complainants does not look suspicious at all. And so, in other words, they were trumping up all, no pun intended, they were trumping up all of these allegations. There was a clear desire to avoid additional levels of scrutiny when executing the lawfare campaign against the Biden administration's political opponents. Cooney noted on February 3rd, and this is J.P. Cooney, a prosecutor who has ultimately served as top deputy special counsel Jack Smith. He noted in February 3rd of 2021 letter to the Attorney General Bill Barr did issue a memorandum in February 2020 requiring both prior written notification and consultation with the Assistant Attorney General and the U.S. Attorney with jurisdiction before investigating declared candidates for Congress. However, Cooney claimed that the Republican targets were fair game as they were no longer candidates but rarely newly sworn-in members of the House. The FBI appears to have kept Rampant 12 alive until January 2022, when Thibault, who was also with Jack Smith, informed a Washington field office field agent who wanted to interview Boebert and Gosar that, quote, direction from FBI HQ is too close to the case. The FBI appears to have kept Rampant 12 alive. Rampant 12 appears to be the predecessor to the case Arctic Frost, Grassley said in a statement. So, in other words, the FBI was surveilling members of Congress long before the Biden administration. They were surveilling GOP members of Congress. And so, I mean, this just tells you that the corruption that we know about, that we knew about, that's been made public, is still far deeper than I think any of it has really been discovered. And this is why transparency and an honest press is so important, because you have outlets, even in Wyoming, that will gloss over things. So, for example, the Megan Degenfelder controversy down in Rock Springs. So Megenfelder issued a statement claiming that she had talked to all of the family members involved, when in reality, she only talked to one. And yet the Cowboy printed her statement verbatim and didn't even check it out. And if they did, they didn't report that Megenfelder had lied in that statement. And so the media in Wyoming, they cover for the liberal redcoats. And if it's a conservative member of the legislature or a prominent conservative, they'll be in attack mode. So anyway, my friends, that'll pretty much do it for today's installment of the broadcast. I'm glad to be back. I'm glad you could join me. And we'll be back tomorrow with Open Line Friday, same bat time, same bat channel. But for now, From the base of the Bighorns, I'm David Iverson, and this is Cowboy State Politics. I'll see you tomorrow, my friends. Have a good afternoon.